Just translation and translation. Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th Canto, Text 1, Translation. Text 1. Maharaj Parikshit said, "O my Lord, O Shukdev Goswami, you have already described in the 2nd canto the path of liberation, Nivritti Marg. By following that path, one is certainly elevated gradually to the highest planetary system, Brahmaloka, from which one is promoted to the spiritual world along with Lord Brahma. Thus, one's repetition of birth and death in the material world ceases." Purport. Since Maharaj Parikshit was a Vaishnava, when he heard the description at the end of the 5th canto of the different hellish conditions of life, he was very much concerned with how to liberate the conditioned souls from the clutches of Maya and take them back home, back to Godhead. Therefore, he reminded his spiritual master, Shukdev Goswami, about the Nivritti Marg, or path of liberation, which he had described in the 2nd canto. Maharaj Parikshit, who at the time of death was fortunate to have met Shukdev Goswami, inquired from Shukdev Goswami about the path of liberation at that crucial time. Shukdev Goswami was very much appreciated his question and congratulated him by saying, "My dear king, your question is glorious because it is very beneficial for all kinds of people. The answer to this question is the prime subject matter for hearing, and it is approved by all transcendentalists." Parikshit Maharaj was astonished that the living entities in the conditioned stage do not accept the path of liberation, devotional service, instead of suffering in so many hellish conditions. This is the symptom of a Vaishnava. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhyavcha. A Vaishnava is an ocean of mercy, para dukha dukhi. He is unhappy because of the unhappiness of others. Therefore, Parikshit Maharaj, being compassionate towards the conditioned souls suffering in hellish life, suggested that Shukdev Goswami continue describing the path of liberation, which he had explained in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam. The word Asamsrishti is very important in this connection. Samsrishti refers to continuing on the path of birth and death. Asamsrishti, on the contrary, refers to Nivritti Marg, or the path of liberation, by which one's birth and death cease, and one gradually progresses to Brahmaloka. Unless one is a pure devotee who does not care about going to the higher planetary systems, in which case one immediately returns home back to Godhead by executing devotional service. Parikshit Maharaj therefore was very eager to hear from Shukdev Goswami about the path of liberation for the conditioned soul. According to the opinion of the Acharyas, the word Kram Yoga Pala Badhena indicates that by first performing Karma Yoga and then Jnana Yoga and finally coming to the platform of Bhakti Yoga, one can be liberated. Bhakti Yoga, however, is so powerful that it does not depend on Karma Yoga or Jnana Yoga. Bhakti Yoga itself is so powerful that even an impious man with no assets in Karma Yoga or an illiterate with no assets in Jnana Yoga can undoubtedly be elevated to the spiritual world if he simply adheres to Bhakti Yoga. Mam aveshyasi asamshaya. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 8.7 that by the process of Bhakti Yoga, one undoubtedly goes back to Godhead, back home to the spiritual world. Yogis, however, instead of going directly to the spiritual world, sometimes want to see other planetary systems, and therefore they ascend to the planetary system where Lord Brahma lives, as indicated here by the word Brahmana. At the time of dissolution, Lord Brahma, along with all the inhabitants of Brahmaloka, goes directly to the spiritual world. This is confirmed in the Vedas as follows. Because of their exalted position, those who are on Brahmaloka at the time of dissolution go directly back home, back to Godhead, along with Lord Brahma. Text 2, translation. O great sage Shukdev Goswami, unless the living entity is freed from the infection of the material modes of nature, he receives different types of bodies in which to enjoy or suffer, and according to the body, he is understood to have various inclinations. By following these inclinations, he traverses the path called Pravarti Marg, by which one may be elevated to the heavenly planets, as you have already described in the third canto. As Lord Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita 9.25, purport. Those who worship the demigods will take birth among demigods. Those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings. Those who worship ancestors go to the ancestors, and those who worship me will live with me. Because of the influence of the various modes of nature, the living entities have various tendencies or propensities, and therefore they are qualified to achieve various destinations. As long as one is materially attached, he wants to be elevated to the heavenly planets because of his attraction to the material world. The Supreme Personality of Godhead declares, however, those who worship me come to me. If one has no information about the Supreme Lord and his abode, one tries to be elevated only to a higher material position. But when one concludes that in this material world there is nothing but repeated birth and death, he tries to return home back to Godhead. If one attains that destination, he need never return to this material world. Yad gatva na nivartante tad dhama paramam nidha. As Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says in Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 19.151, according to their karma, all living entities are wandering throughout the entire universe. Some of them are being elevated to the upper planetary systems, and some are going down into the lower planetary systems. Out of many millions of wandering living entities, one who is very fortunate gets an opportunity to associate with a bona fide spiritual master by the grace of Krishna. By the mercy of both Krishna and the spiritual master, such a person receives the seed of the creeper of devotional service. All living entities are rotating throughout the universe, going sometimes up to the higher planetary systems and sometimes going down to the lower planets. This is the material disease, which is known as Pravarti Marg. When one becomes intelligent, he takes to Nivritti Marg, the path of liberation, and thus, instead of rotating within this material world, he returns back home, back to Godhead. This is necessary. Text 3. Translation. You have also described at the end of 5th canto the varieties of hellish life that result from impious activities, and you have described in the 4th canto the first Manvantara, which was presided over by Swayambhuva Manu, the son of Lord Brahma. Text 4th and 5th. Translation. My dear Lord, you have described the dynasties and characteristics of King Priyavrata and King Uttanpad. The Supreme Personality of Godhead created this material world with various universes, planetary systems, planets, and stars, with varied land, seas, oceans, mountains, rivers, gardens, and trees, all with different characteristics. These are divided among this planet Earth, the luminaries in the sky, and the lower planetary systems. You have very clearly described these planets and the living entities who live on them. Purport. Here the words Yahedam, Asrijat Vibhu clearly indicate that the Supreme, the Great, Almighty Personality of Godhead created this entire material world with its different varieties of planets, stars, and so forth. Atheists try to conceal the hand of God, which is present in every creation, but they cannot explain how all these creations could come into existence without a competent intelligence and almighty power behind them. Simply to imagine or speculate is a waste of time. In Bhagavad Gita 10.8, the Lord says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo, I am the origin of everything. Mata sarvam pravartate, whatever exists in the entire creation emanates from me. Iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvitaha. When one fully understands that I create everything by my omnipotence, one becomes firmly situated in devotional service and fully surrenders at my lotus feet. Unfortunately, the unintelligent cannot immediately understand Krishna's supremacy. Nonetheless, if they associate with the devotees and read authorized books, they may gradually come to the proper understanding. Although this may take many births, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7.19, after many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. Vasudeva, Krishna, is the creator of everything, and his energy is displayed in various ways. As explained in Bhagavad Gita 7.4 to 7.5, a combination of the material energy, Bhumer Apo Nalo Vayu, and the spiritual energy, the living entity, exists in every creation. Therefore, the same principle, the combination of the Supreme Spirit and the material elements, is the cause of the cosmic manifestation. Text 6. Translation. O greatly fortunate and opulent Shukdev Goswami, now kindly tell me how human beings may be saved from having to enter hellish conditions in which they suffer terrible pains. Purport. In the 26th chapter of the 5th canto, Shukdev Goswami has explained that people who commit sinful acts are forced to enter hellish planets and suffer. Now Maharaj Parikshit, being a devotee, is concerned how this can be stopped. A Vaishnava is par dukha dukhi. In other words, he has no personal troubles, but he is very unhappy to see others in trouble. Prahlad Maharaj said, My Lord, I have no personal problems, for I have learned how to glorify your transcendental qualities and thus enter a trance of ecstasy. I do have a problem, however, for I am simply thinking of these rascals and fools who are busy with Maya Sukha, temporary happiness without knowledge of devotional service unto you. This is the problem faced by a Vaishnava, because a Vaishnava fully takes shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He personally has no problems, but because he is compassionate toward the fallen, conditioned souls, he is always thinking of plans to save them from their hellish life in this body and the next. Parikshit Maharaj therefore anxiously wanted to know from Shukdev Goswami how humanity can be saved from gliding down to hell. Shukdev Goswami had already explained how people enter hellish life, and he could also explain how they could be saved from it. Intelligent men must take advantage of these instructions. Unfortunately, however, the entire world is lacking Krishna consciousness, and therefore people are suffering from the grossest ignorance and do not even believe in a life after this one. To convince them of their next life is very difficult because they have become almost mad in the pursuit of material enjoyment. Nevertheless, our duty, the duty of all sane men, is to save them. Maharaj Parikshit is the representative of one who can save them. Text 7. Translation. Shukdev Goswami replied, My dear king, if before one's next death, whatever impious acts one has performed in this life with his mind, words, and body are not counteracted through proper atonement according to the description of the Manu Samhita and other Dharma Shastras, one will certainly enter the hellish planets after death and undergo terrible sufferings, as I have previously described to you. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions that although Maharaj Parikshit was a pure devotee, Shukdev Goswami did not immediately speak to him about the strength of devotional service. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 14.26, devotional service is so strong that if one fully surrenders to Krishna and takes fully to his devotional service, the reactions of his sinful life immediately stop. Elsewhere, in Gita 18.66, Lord Krishna urges that one give up all other duties and surrender to him. And he promises, Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshishyami. I shall free you from all sinful reactions and give you liberation. Therefore, in response to the inquiries of Parikshit Maharaj, Shukdev Goswami, his guru, could have immediately explained the principle of bhakti. But to test Parikshit Maharaj's intelligence, he first prescribed atonement according to Karma Kand, the path of fruitive activities. For Karma Kand, there are 80 authorized scriptures, such as Manu Samhita, which are known as Dharma Shastras. In these scriptures, one is advised to counteract his sinful acts by performing other types of fruitive action. This was the path first recommended by Shukdev Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit, and actually it is a fact that one who does not take to devotional service must follow the decision of these scriptures by performing pious acts to counteract his impious acts. This is known as atonement. Text 8. Translation. Therefore, before one's next death, as long as one's body is strong enough, one should quickly adopt the process of atonement according to Shastra. Otherwise, one's time will be lost and the reactions of his sins will increase. As an expert physician diagnoses and treats a disease according to its gravity, one should undergo atonement according to the severity of one's sin. Purport. The Dharma Shastras, like Manu Samhita, prescribe that a man who has committed murder should be hanged and his own life sacrificed in atonement. Previously, this system was followed all over the world, but since people are becoming atheists, they are stopping capital punishment. This is not wise. Herein, it is said that a physician who knows how to diagnose a disease prescribes medicine accordingly. If the disease is very serious, the medicine must be strong. The weight of a murderer's sin is very great, and therefore, according to Manu Samhita, a murderer must be killed. By killing a murderer, the government shows mercy to him, because if a murderer is not killed in this life, he will be killed and forced to suffer many times in future lives. Since people do not know about the next life and the intricate workings of nature, they manufacture their own laws, but they should properly consult the established injunctions of the Shastras and act accordingly. In India, even today, the Hindu community often takes advice from expert scholars regarding how to counteract sinful activities. In Christianity also, there is a process of confession and atonement. Therefore, atonement is required, and atonement must be undergone according to the gravity of one's sinful acts. Text 9. Translation. Maharaj Parikshit said, one may know that sinful activity is injurious for him because he actually sees that a criminal is punished by the government and rebuked by people in general, and because he hears from scriptures and learned scholars that one is thrown into hellish conditions in next life for committing sinful acts. Nevertheless, in spite of such knowledge, one is forced to commit sins again and again, even after performing act of atonement. Therefore, what is the value of such atonement? Purport. In some religious sects, a sinful man goes to priest to confess his sinful acts and pay a fine. But then again he commits the same sins and returns to confess them again. This is the practice of a professional sinner. Parikshit Maharaja's observations indicate that even 5,000 years ago, it was the practice of criminals to atone for their crimes, but then commit the same crimes again, as if forced to do so. Therefore, owing to his practical experience, Maharaj Parikshit saw that the process of repeatedly sinning and atoning is pointless. Regardless of how many times he is punished, one who is attached to sense enjoyment will commit sinful acts again and again until he is trained to refrain from enjoying his senses. The word vivasha is used herein, indicating that even one who does not want to commit sinful acts will be forced to do so by habit. Parikshit Maharaj therefore considered the process of atonement to have little value for saving one from sinful acts. In the following verse, he further explains his rejection of this process. Text 10, translation. Sometimes one who is very alert so as not to commit sinful acts is victimized by sinful life again. I therefore consider this process of repeated sinning and atoning to be useless. It is like bathing of an elephant, for an elephant cleanses itself by taking a full bath, but then throws dust over its head and body as soon as it returns to the land. Purport. When Maharaj Parikshit inquired how a human being could free himself from sinful activities so as not to be forced to go to hellish planetary systems after death, Shukdev Goswami answered that the process of counteracting sinful life is atonement. In this way, Shukdev Goswami tested the intelligence of Maharaj Parikshit, who passed the examination by refusing to accept this process as genuine. Now, Parikshit Maharaj is expecting another answer from his spiritual master, Shukdev Goswami. Text 11. Translation. Shukdev Goswami, the son of Vyasadeva, answered, My dear king, since acts meant to neutralize impious actions are also fruitive, they will not release one from the tendency to act fruitively. Persons who subject themselves to the rules and regulations of atonement are not at all intelligent. Indeed, they are in the modes of darkness. Unless one is freed from the mode of ignorance, trying to counteract one action through another is useless, because this will not uproot one's desires. Thus, even though one may superficially seem pious, he will undoubtedly be prone to act impiously. Therefore, real atonement is enlightenment in perfect knowledge, Vedanta, by which one understands the supreme absolute truth. Purport. The Guru, Shukdev Goswami, has examined Parikshit Maharaj, and it appears that the king has passed one phase of the examination by rejecting the process of atonement because it involves fruitive activities. Now Shukdev Goswami is suggesting the platform of speculative knowledge, progressing from Karmakan to Jnanakan. He is proposing Prayaschitam Vimarshanam. Real atonement is full knowledge. Vimarshana refers to the cultivation of speculative knowledge. In the Bhagavad Gita, karmis who are lacking in knowledge are compared to asses. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7.15, those miscreants who are grossly foolish, lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. Thus, karmis who engage in sinful acts and who do not know the true objective of life are called mudas, asses. Vimarshana, however, is also explained in Bhagavad Gita 15.15, where Krishna says, Vedeshta sarve aham eva vedya. The purpose of Vedic study is to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one studies Vedanta, but merely advances somewhat in speculative knowledge and does not understand the Supreme Lord, one remains the same Muda. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 7.19, one attains real knowledge when he understands Krishna and surrenders unto him. Bahunam janam anande jnanavan mam prapadyate. To become learned and free from material contamination, therefore, one should try to understand Krishna, for thus one is immediately liberated from all pious and impious activities and their reactions. Text 12. Translation. My dear king, if a deceased person eats the pure, uncontaminated food prescribed by a physician, he is gradually cured and the infection of disease can no longer touch him. Similarly, if one follows the regulative principles of knowledge, he gradually progresses toward liberation from material contamination. Purport. One is gradually purified if one cultivates knowledge, even though mental speculation, and strictly follows the regulative principles enjoined in the Shastras and explained in the next verse. Therefore, the platform of Gyan, speculative knowledge, is better than the platform of Karma, fruitive action. There is every chance of falling down from the platform of Karma to hellish conditions, but on the platform of Gyan, one is saved from hellish life, although one is still not completely free from infection. The difficulty is that on the platform of Gyan, one thinks that he has been liberated and has become Narayan or Bhagavan. This is another phase of ignorance. So Srimad Bhagavatam 10.2.32 says, because of ignorance, one speculatively thinks himself liberated from the material contamination, although actually he is not. Therefore, even if one rises to Brahma Gyan, understanding of Brahman, one nevertheless falls down because of not taking shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. Nonetheless, Jnanis at least know what is sinful and what is pious, and they very cautiously act according to the injunctions of the Shastras. Texts 13 and 14. Translation. To concentrate the mind, one must observe a life of celibacy and not fall down. One must undergo the austerity of voluntarily giving up sense enjoyment. One must then control the mind and senses, give charity, be truthful, clean, and non-violent, follow the regulative principles, and regularly chant the holy names of the Lord. Thus, a sober and faithful person who knows the religious principles is temporarily purified of all sins performed with his body, words, and mind. These sins are like the dried leaves of creepers beneath a bamboo tree, which may be burned by fire, although their roots remain to grow again at the first opportunity. Purport. Tapa is explained in the Smriti Shastra as follows. Manasas Chendriyananam cha ekagrayam param tapaha. Complete control of the mind and senses and their complete concentration on one kind of activity is called tapa. Our Krishna consciousness movement is teaching people how to concentrate the mind on devotional service. This is first class tapa. Brahmacharya, the life of celibacy, has 8 aspects. One should not think of women, speak about sex life, dally with women, look lustfully at women, talk intimately with women, or decide to engage in sexual intercourse. Nor should one endeavor for sex life or engage in sex life. One should not even think of women or look at them, to say nothing of talking with them. This is called first class brahmacharya. If a brahmachari or sannyasi talks with a woman in a secluded place, naturally there will be a possibility of sex life without anyone's knowledge. Therefore, a complete brahmachari practices just the opposite. If one is a perfect brahmachari, he can very easily control the mind and senses, give charity, speak truthfully, and so forth. To begin, however, one must control the tongue and the process of eating.